You know, Iran used to produce uranium at 93% enrichment. That was brought down to 20%, now 3.67%. How landmark is this deal? How much of a breakthrough is it?
This deal is adequate to ensure that they won't build nuclear weapons, in my opinion.
So 3.67%, what does that mean? What can that power?
That's ordinary reactor fuel in most countries of the world. That's what most of the reactors in the United States run on, and the reactors in Russia and China and almost every other country has that as the normal enrichment for nuclear power.
And yet you think the two most important words in this deal are what?
Yeah, you take this enormous document and look at Article 15, and it says Iran will allow IAEA to monitor online enrichment measurement and use electronic seals. Those are the important words. That means that we can look at every pipe in the system and look at the enrichment going around in their isotope separation cascade.
So online monitoring. And yet, Jordan, I wonder from you, there's going to be huge pressure on the United States to surveil Iran's activities. Could we see more Stuxnet-style spying?
Yeah, you know, it's an interesting question because, you know, well, certainly we have, there's going to be less incentive, you know, on the U.S. Part to pursue destructive cyber attacks because there is this this deal in place. You know, you can't imagine a situation in which the White House would go to Fort Meade, you know, and tell them to stop spying on Iran to make sure that this deal is proceeding as planned. In fact, you could imagine it being the opposite, that there could be increased cyber spying, not with a destructive aim, but in terms of surveillance and intelligence gathering. You know, you can't imagine a situation in which that stops or slows.
Liam, what's your take? I mean, Stuxnet was designed specifically to sabotage Iranian nuclear facilities. Are we going to see more malicious malware, or are we going to see other kinds of surveillance?
That's right. Stuxnet was specifically designed for sabotage, so we don't know exactly who would still have motivation to sabotage the centrifuges, but there could still be that possibility out there. But it's more likely that we'll see espionage at this particular time to particularly see if what was promised in the negotiations is being performed and the deal is being held up. So we do expect to see additional espionage. In fact, since Stuxnet was released 5 years ago, we've seen a huge increase in espionage threats in general, backed by governments. So we expect that to continue.
What's your take on this, Professor, in terms of whether this could lead to increased cyber activity?
Stuxnet, to my way of looking at it, was largely a failure. It's sort of like telling all the taxi cab drivers in New York City to drive at 90 miles an hour across town and then come to a complete stop. It was code written to controllers that quickly was found out about. It didn't really destroy that many centrifuges, and it morphed into something that did more damage here.
And yet, on that note, Jordan, you've said that this was like the gold standard for hackers. How does a program like that get developed, and how would it happen if it was done again today?
Sure. You know, I mean, to this day, you know, Stuxnet really was kind of the model for one of the most advanced cyber attacks we've seen, you know, and the kind of the scale of it, the ambition of it was certainly beyond anything we'd seen before, publicly at least. But it did have the fatal flaw that we've discussed, which is it got out. That's the only reason we know about it. And it just goes to show that, you know, programs like that, when you're dealing with this type of activity, there are a lot of imperfections and there are a lot of unknowns that need to be worked out. You know, and a big question mark around Stuxnet was, you know, we don't know where else the U.S. and Israel, you know, have used similar programs. Have those governments used them against North Korea? You know, have they used them again in other parts of the world? There's still lots of unanswered questions there. So while I wouldn't expect to see a Stuxnet, you know, kind of part 2, you know, we could certainly expect to see lots more surveillance. You know, if anything, that amount would just increase.
So, Liam, you know, what's your take on what else we could see and how it might compare to, you know, the way that cyber attacks at the time of Stuxnet were planned and executed?
Right. Well, the resources that were used to create Stuxnet, they haven't disappeared. So those resources are still available, and they're more than likely being put into new programs now. And actually what we've seen most recently, we've seen a lot of espionage around summits and negotiations. So the G8 summit, the G20, and particularly the P5+1, we've most recently seen attacks where hotels, where the negotiators were likely to be staying, hotels around the negotiation venues, were being hacked so that attackers could spy on the people who are staying in those hotels. So that's the sort of level of espionage we're looking at right now, and that's what we know about. There's probably a lot more going on that we are not aware of right now, and there's going to be a lot more going on in the future. So clearly, any sort of international negotiations are a very highly prized espionage target.
And quickly, Professor, what are you going to be watching now that this deal is done?
I'm going to be watching what the engineers and scientists actually have access to and what they're doing, and seeing if there's going to be able to verify all the terms of this treaty.